welcome to another installment of NMRA X. Certainly, last weekend was great. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all did as well. Fantastic feedback on the whole. Lots of people are enjoying the videos. We have uploaded them to YouTube now, and they will be going live. If they're not already published, they'll be being published very soon. So you'll be able to see each clinic as an individual separate 1 hour video. And we hope that you go to the NMRA YouTube channel and subscribe, and that's where we'll be putting our videos. Tonight, it's not clinics. Tonight, I'm joined by a panel of master model railroaders who have all completed our achievement program at the NMRA, which is a program that we use to bring on people's modeling skills, knowledge, and experience, and up everybody's level of ability. So these are guys that have done quite a lot of work. They do quite a lot of stuff in the hobby. Generally, as MMRs, you'll see MMRs all over the place, and a lot of people go, "What's an MMR?" Well, that's a master model railroader. So if you ever see that behind someone's name, now you know. So the format of tonight will be that we have some questions already that people have submitted over the last week, and I'll put that to the panel. If you want to ask a question, put it in the comments, and I will endeavour to pick it up. But we'll just see how this goes, and we'll go around to start with. We'll let everybody that's on the panel introduce themselves. I've got 4 people tonight. We've got Clark Kooning from somewhere where the bears live in Canada. We've got Thomas Gasior from the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. We have Gerry Hopkins from not far away from Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. So we have Tom and Gerry. See, Gordy gives you everything, okay? Tom and Gerry, what more could you want? And we finally, but not least, we have Jim Gore, who used to join us from Florida, but now joins us from New Hampshire in the United States. So with that, we'll let Clark introduce himself, tell you all a bit about himself, and then let Clark pass it on to the rest of our panel.
Well, thank you very much, Gordy. My name is Clark Kooning. I used to live in the Toronto area, and I moved to Elliott Lake, Ontario, which is about a 6-hour drive north of Toronto. I reside about 20 miles on top of Lake Huron in the Great Lakes. For a number of reasons. One, it's a fantastic place to live. The fishing is great in the summer, great in the winter. And the winters are long, so I get a lot of model railroading in. My role in the NMRA has been sort of a fair amount of stuff I've done. I have been the region president in the Niagara Frontier region twice. I've been an AP judge in the region and at national. I have been the Canadian director for all of Canada for the NMRA, and the list kind of goes on. I guess my most recent post was 3 years ago when I was the vice president of administration for the NMRA. And I also developed and managed a program called Modeling with the Masters, which is a hands-on program. We started doing that at separate weekends, and then we developed into a program at the national convention. So that was a lot of fun, and I did that for almost 26 years. And I was happy to give it to Jim Gore, which is also on the panel today. So Jim is now the manager, and I'm just one of his instructors. So it's been quite a ride. I dabble in pretty well every scale. When friends of mine come over, they say, "What scale are you in?" And they don't say what in the month or the year. They usually say this hour. I have Z scale, I have N scale, T-track modules, I have HON3, I have a big, large new HO layout that I'm working on, and it's modern, situated up here in Northern Ontario, and so I'm working on all kinds of stuff, SN3, ON30, ON3, so I'm familiar with many scales. So if you want to join in, ask some questions. I think you have a terrific panel, and I'll turn it back to Gordy.
All right, thanks, Clark. So we'll drop down to Tom.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Tom Gasior, like Gordy said, from the Twin Cities. I don't have quite the resume Clark has through the NMRA. I've basically been helping out with the social media. I run their Twitter program. I work with Gordy and Christina on the Facebook and Instagram, and also putting on clinics. And I'm trying to help Gordy. We started out with these live programs in the Twin Cities, and this is just an extension of it to help answer all the questions. So I'll leave it at that, and we can move on with the show. Next person.
Thanks, Tom. We'll go from Tom to Gerry. I think we'll go upside down to Gerry. Welcome,
Okay.
Gerry.
Thank you. I'm currently the AP regional chairman, and I'm also the regional contest chairman because I like models. I've been the editor for 10 years of the Mainline, our regional magazine. I passed on a few years ago to someone else. I've been a divisional superintendent for a session, 2 years. So I've been around most of the time. It's AP, and in my retired life, I do installs of decoders for a lot of people. So that's what takes up too much of my time these days. So yeah, I'm fairly knowledgeable on DCC track work. I model Great Northern in HO, and I have a theme park which models the Sandy River and Rangy Lakes in HON 30. So I get a bit of both worlds. I don't get enough time on my own stuff, but I do have operating session once a month with one group, and about once every 3 months with another group. So yeah, keep busy. It's out the pub.
Right, enough of the pub. Thanks, Gerry. Jim?
I'm here. Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Gore. I'm a resident of New Hampshire for at least for the last 6 weeks. Before that, I was in Florida for about 25, 30 years, working in academia. I was a professor of biology and a dean for a while. And I only mention that just because I am a stickler for the correct scenery in places, because my biological bits hang out at times when I look at people's scenery. I model in ON 30, a little bit of northern New Mexico, in the mountains around northern New Mexico, with a tie into the Chile lines. What I do for the NMRA is a whole bunch of things. At one time, I was the AP chair for the Sunshine region for about 6-7 years. I'm currently on the board of directors of the National, the at-large North American director, which doesn't mean I represent just North America. It's a way to sort of increase the diversity of participants on the board, but every board member represents the entire NMRA. I'm also, as Clark mentioned, now the manager of the Modeling with the Masters program. I still have Clark looking over my shoulder to make sure I'm doing it right. And yeah, sure, Clark. So that's where I am right now. Just trying to figure out where to put a layout in a house built in 1803.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Okay, so we'll hit the questions. I know a few people there wanted us to get to the questions, but I think it's important that we introduce the panel at the very least, and give you guys some background on these folks so that you can give us some good questions. So, Tom, the only comment was, can you move a little closer to your mic? That was the only issue. You were a little quiet. Okay, so the first question's from Richard Reynolds. Nice, easy one. We'll quickly go around with this one, I think. He says his favorite locomotive is a Pennsylvania Railroad GG1. But his favorite model locomotive is the Athern F7. So I'll go around the panel in a sec. The question is, what's your favorite prototype locomotive, and what's your favorite locomotive that's been built has been made as a ready-to-run model? And we'll go to Clark first, I think.
Depends on what scale. I guess in narrow gauge stuff, I love the C16, which is a what is it, a 260
260.
260? Yes, I have to think about it myself. And I love it in the bumblebee scheme if it's a narrow gauge. If it's a modern locomotive or relatively modern, I love a GP9. I think they're just great. And being a Canadian, I also love the GMD1, which is a real ugly kind of locomotive, but it's fun. So that would be my top three.
All right, cool. So we'll go to Gerry in Australia. What's your favorite prototype locomotive and your favorite model?
Well, the ones I like running are my 080s or 060s, the switches. It's nice, something nice and small. In diesels, cheap 9s, because they're nice universal locos. But I do love the sound of Alcos. So I've got RS2s as well, always sound. And those are my favorites. They're all ready to run. Scratch built stuff is down in the HON 30, so stick with the HO for the time being.
Okay, cool. We'll go to Jim.
Well, I was just about to say that it may not be appropriate, but probably my most favorite one is a Garrett. They're beautiful, beautiful engines. I saw them operate when I lived in South Africa for a few years, and I love them. I wish they could make one for me in ON30, but I haven't seen one yet. As far as engines go that are commercially made, K27s. I love a K27, a Mud Hen. It's a beautiful, squatty-bodied little thing that I enjoy watching run. And as far as diesels go, I like Alcos. Also, I really like RS1s. So don't have them operating in ON30, but I love an RS1.
Okay, cool. And last but not least, Tom?
Well, for prototypes, since I get to run them, I would go with the SD40-2. When I started, they were still road power, and now they're yards. I like them. They're comfortable. They look they look very well laid out, and I've always liked the SD40-2, the lines of it. For modeling, I like Alcos. I'm with the rest of the guys. And my favorite model would be the Alco C636 with the high adhesion trucks. It just looks like such a brute. I model an HO scale, and Bowser did a wonderful job of it, and Overland Models and some other ones. So I like the exotic ones in modeling and the reliable ones in the prototype.
Fantastic. Okay, and someone on the stream is just pointing out that C16 is apparently a 280. C for Constellation.
Is that what I said?
No, I said 260. It's 280. Yeah. Yep.
Yes, it is a 280.
See, this was the toughest question. Asking modelers about a prototype question was a tough one. We're getting to the easy stuff for you guys now. So, question from Dustin: what's the best way to clean track? Who wants to go first with this one? Gerry?
Okay, you'll get a lot of different answers, but I use a piece of cork, a piece of old roll bed, and CRC 226, which is a cleaning solution and oxide inhibitor. Do this twice a year, January and July, and that's all I need on my layout. The door's open to the elements most of the time that I'm in it, and that's most days. Go around with that, let the stuff dry for 2 days, and then I can run trains and I have no more problems. I don't like using all the gritty stuff. It's like using an angle grinder on the track. I once had an argument with a gentleman. He said, it doesn't scratch. I said, there's a nice clean Mercedes over there that's got some bird droppings on it. Clean them off and see what happens. He was going to, but the owner stopped him because he knew it would scratch.
Okay, thanks, Gerry. Anyone else got any advance on the bit of cork? Jim?
Well, I use, I must admit, I use a Bright Boy, but probably once a year maybe. And the rest of the time I use Goo Gone on a pad and it works fine.
Cool. Clark?
Yeah, I use a Bright Boy about once a year. Usually I don't run much over the summer because I'm out fishing. But in the fall, I'll come in, give it one rub, and then something like Gerry, I use a piece of cork and I'll just rub it over the top of the surface. No, I don't use any liquid, and it seems to work fine. Now, just recently from another MMR, I heard he is using graphite stick, and he will rub the turns off the power, rubs the graphite stick maybe just over an inch of track every 10 feet. And then he runs his trains, and the graphite is transferred over the rail by the wheels. And he said it's really been a wonder for him. It really works well. And he's also one of our fellow Mowing with the Masters guys. That's Peter Youngblood in Atlanta.
Cool. Right. I guess good conductivity from graphite. So, Tom.
All right. What I'm currently using is the CRC 26. Joe Fugate in Model Road Hobbyist had a wonderful op-ed on these, some scientifically method of keeping your track clean. And I basically spray it onto a old pair of blue jeans that I've nailed to a block. And what this stuff does is when you use the other residue, your wheels go around and it creates an arc, which creates the pitting, which Jim and Gerry and everyone else says you don't want to use abrasives. And some of your electrical contact cleaner will create an abrasive. But the CRC 26 actually puts a protective barrier down. So I've been using that and I've had zero problems. So it's kind of it's an electrical cleaner. It just got out the hardware, multi-purpose. They call it a precision lubricant for some reason. I don't know. But I read that article and I've tried it and it's been wonders so far. So that's the latest and greatest shiny object for cleaning track for me.
Good use of the word shiny there. Okay. Okay, so we're over to some construction questions and some weathering questions. So Scott Perry asked, when scratch building in brick, what's the best way to make the corners perfect? I'm guessing he's talking about lining up the courses of the brickwork. So who wants to take that question?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't build in brick very much.
Yeah,
It depends on what the material is made out of.
Yeah.
Okay, so Clark? Yeah, we'll go to Clark.
I think you said me, Gordy. You kind of cut out there for a second.
Yeah.
I know Scott actually, so this might we can have this discussion. Scott, if you ever email me, we can yak about it. I guess it is, as Jim said, it's the material. If it's a styrene material, you can get it as close as you can and then fill it in. There's a number of fillers you can use, and then you're going to have to carve that brick around. If it's like the wood laser cut ones, that becomes a little bit more difficult. And a lot of times I will cut it or sand it a little bit on about a 45 to try and get it to match. But trying to line up the exact brick around that corner, it's a difficult task because you've cut the material, and unless you actually cut it up high or up low to actually fit that mortar line, it makes it difficult. So that's a good question. And if you give me a shout, we can talk about it.
So our answer is it's difficult.
It's difficult.
Yes.
If you have plaster walls or plaster cast walls, it's a little bit easier because you can carve it. And that's usually what I make brick buildings out of is plaster. And you can use a spackling compound or something like that to fill in the gaps, and just a dental tool to carve the brick lines in.
Okay, cool. Anybody got any other answers for that? No? Okay, we'll move on. So James asks, what are your tips for weathering when you've got a cardstock structure? Or a cardstock model, full stop. Who wants to go first? Jim? You chomping at the bit. Go on, Jim.
Well, again, that depends on what effect you're looking for. I'm building a cardstock model, as a matter of fact, right now. And if a piece is metal, I tend to want to weather it to make it look a little rusty. And what I'll do is use a Copic pen. I think a T42 is what I use. Because it has a solvent base to it, it draws some of the dye right into the paper. And so if you run it along the edge of your piece of paper, it'll draw it in just maybe a half a millimeter or so to give it kind of a rusted appearance. And so I've used Copic pens for that, and for corrugated metal and things like that. If it's made out of paper, works really well to give the edges a nice rusted appearance. Other than that, I use pan pastels. And you can use pan pastels quite nicely. The only trick that I've found with using cardstock is that I'll start off with my basic colors and then take a fresh, clean sponge to blend it, so that the blending is a little bit more difficult in cardstock than it is, say, with wood or painted wood or dyed wood. But you can use pan pastels just like you would to weather anything else, and it works quite well on cardstock.
Okay. I'll throw a question in based on that. Would you guys do anything to seal a cardstock model before you applied any weathering?
Usually I seal cardstock before I even start building. I spray it with a dull coat of some sort, and that also helps prevent UV damage to the paper as well. And then that also gives it a little bit of tooth when you put on the pan pastels later on. I never seal the pan pastels.
Okay. Cool. Any other answers? Move on. Okay. So this is from Patrick Grace in Buchan, Aberdeenshire, which is my division in Scotland. So be careful how you answer this question. He asks for the panel's thoughts, and the questions are coming in like mental. So I shall add these on in just a second, guys. So, what are the panel's thoughts on remote assessment of models that need to get merit awards or be assessed for merit award, and also for support for supporting modelers who live in remote communities to ensure they have equitable access to the achievement program in the NMRA? Who wants to go first with answering that? Gerry? We go to Gerry in Australia.
Well, we've got the biggest region, so it's spread out quite a bit. Distance is not really a problem. Most of the residential areas are all around the coast, some inland, but not too far. If someone in a remote area wants something judged, I get them to send a few photographs in first to see if it's worth the trip. And if it is, then I'll ask one of the MMRs closest to them to pop out and do the judging and take someone with them. This hasn't failed so far. To travel 200 kilometers to do some judging, that's not a problem. I know in the UK, distance is different because you have more people living in small areas, and you can't go far without running into another town. But here in Australia, go for an operating session, you wouldn't worry about driving 200 kilometers there and 200 back. And it's the same for judging. And I know with the other AP people in the different divisions, they're quite happy to do the same. They'll like to go out and have a look at good modeling at any time. So distance is not a major problem in Australia. Not yet. It hasn't been. Remote assessment, yeah, haven't had to do it, so I can't comment really on that side of it.
Well, we have done remote assessments in Florida, and we've done a couple of different experiments where we had 3 master model railroaders evaluate a model remotely, and then it just so happened the following weekend we could all gather in the same place and model or evaluate the model physically. And within about, I think, plus or minus about 2%, we were spot on with the remote evaluation as we were with the physical evaluation up front. And so what we've done is we've started to write a little bit of a white paper, if you will, for the board of directors to show that it might be something that's considered. And actually, Frank Koch, who's in charge of the National AP program, is quite enthusiastic at us as a way to help us evaluate some models. When I lived in Florida, for example, if I had to model or evaluate a model by a modeler in Key West, for example, I'd have to drive all day to get to Key West, stay overnight, evaluate the model, and drive yet another day back. And so in some cases, that a remote evaluation, I think, would prove to be very, very nice.
Who wants to go? Clark?
I'm 50-50 on it right at the moment. I haven't had enough experience with it, but I think it's got great possibilities. And here even in Ontario, I mean, we had a fellow who lived even 5 hours north of me. So if I was still living in the Toronto area, it'd be an 11-hour drive just to go visit him to evaluate. And I think it would be a great opportunity if we can service people that way. I've been putting together a practice AP judging thing, so which would all be done remotely. And I'm kind of curious to see, I'm actually looking for about 5 or 6 test people to test it with me one night to see how it works. And if that worked, and these models have all been judged, so I know what the scores have been in about 3 different judging. So I think it would be a great opportunity to see how well they do. And like Jim sort of, if we can come within even 4 or 5%, you're probably it's quite doable. So I think we're all learning this process. So if you have a member that is remote, just hang in there. We'll get to you. Because the object of the NMRA is to serve every member. There's no question. But we have to do it, in a reasonable manner.
Okay. Tom, we've not been to you. What do you think?
I think it's a great possibility. I think that as the technology goes ahead, as this is proving, and as long as the person who wants that certificate judged has as good a technology as the judge or the judges, you can show things you've done for almost, most of the AP things for civil and electrical. And if you use it as like, okay, here's photographs of me building it. Now I'm going to go to a live and spin it around and show Jim and Clark and Gerry how I made this model. I do agree. You'll get within, 5% of judging and things. I think as long as the judges and the person doing it have decent technology and, better cameras and so forth and so on. So that's dragging the NMRA into the future once again. But I think that's the way to go. I think it has great potential.
Yeah. No, thanks, Tom. I obviously I'm biased that I agree because I live on an island in the middle of the North Atlantic. The only thing I would say is that actually taking a photograph of your model and sending it, more things show up on a photograph, and you can zoom on a photograph more than the naked eye can in a contest room or in a celebration room. So actually, it can be tougher to be remote assessed than it can be to be assessed in person.
Probably true.
The one thing I just wanted to pass on is that Clark, Bruce Wilson has offered to help you with your assessment stuff.
All right.
Before I lose track of that in the comments, because we've got 117 people watching right now, so it's busy. Okay.
If I may, Gord, I may.
Carry on, because I want to write a question down. Go
on. Email me at Kooning, Kooning, at M as in Mary, S as in Sam, N as in Norman.com. So MSN.com. And I'll put you on a list and we'll figure out a common date and we'll have an experiment.
All right, cool. Okay, I've got loads of questions coming in. Sorry, guys. Okay, Daniel Brewer would be interested to know if anyone in the panel has any experience with LCC, which is layout command control for those not familiar with that acronym. Clark.
I will say I have a lot of interest and no knowledge. I think we have a lot of guys out there that are very capable. So if you want to actually write specific questions down and maybe send it to us, we'll get one of our guys who are into LECC, and we can help you out.
Cool. Anybody else? Everyone's looking at their feet.
No experience at all.
That's fine. That's okay. It's all right. We are not. This is proof in the pudding that there are people that are experts in certain fields and not in others, and that's absolutely fine. Master Model Railroader means you've met a set of requirements to get that award. It doesn't mean that you have mastered every potential aspect of probably the world's biggest hobby in terms of things you need to know everything. So that's fine. Okay. Richard Dahl asks, what are your thoughts on design software for model railroads? Do you have any recommendations or comments around pitfalls or any other observations you'd like to make about using, I'm guessing, design software to design track plans, I'm guessing?
I'm afraid I'm a computer modeler, but I have never used design software. I still use a piece of paper and a pencil.
Clark?
I will. I've used one particular one. It was a free, very basic one, and I found the learning curve much harder for me. And I went back to the old pencil and paper routine as well. Years ago, there was a template you could buy for that was cut out of plastic, and it had turnouts on and everything else, and it was all the scale and radiuses. And I still have mine, and I still use it. So if I'm doing stuff like that, but as far as sort of the new age of modeling. Now, one thing I will tell you with any track plan, especially the computer-generated ones, when you go to lay it out, it's usually more room than what it's configured on the piece of paper. It just takes that maybe extra half inch or that extra inch. So you have to be a little cautious of that.
Okay, cool. Anyone else who wants to go next? Tom?
Well, one of the things, even though it's not designing on the computer, there's people like Fast Tracks that put out downloadable diagrams of turnouts and diamonds and curves and things like that you can print out and lay in real, like Clark says, you'll get the exact measurements for a yard ladder or for a siding or a spur. So if you can't design it on a computer because you don't have CAD skills, you can at least download some accurate track measurements and see, does a number 6 switch fit? Does a number 5 switch? Number 4. What will work, for the radius or for that spur? There's other, you can actually physically put them on when you build your layout bench work. So you can get help that way.
Okay. Any other answers? So I'm not an MMR, but I'm going to help answer this question because the guys are struggling. There are many different bits of track design software. One of the easiest ones to use is AnyRail. And the reason that's the easiest one to use is because it's got pretty much every piece of track available in the world loaded into it from manufacturers in Europe, North America, United Kingdom, Australia, Japan, you name it, it's in there. And if it's not in there, you can design it and add it, and then everyone else benefits from the library. The only thing is there's a 50-piece limit. So if you're going to design a basement empire, you've got to pony up and pay the very small license fee to help support the software. But yeah, the only thing I'll say is that if you draw it on paper and you don't use the paper templates like Tom said, you've got to be very, very good with your measurements. Whereas if you use design software and you measure your room correctly, it's like getting a kitchen fitted, I guess. Then you should be reasonably confident that it'll fit. And the piece of design software will tell you that you've got that radius too tight. So that's some of the advantages of using it. But yeah, it is It is at first a steep learning curve, but okay. But that's maybe one we could do a clinic on. I could do a clinic on that for a later future iteration of NMRAX. Okay. Back to less technical questions for you boys. Bruce Wilson asks a question directed at Jim Gore.
Oh, great.
Sitting comfortably there in your chair. He says, Jim Gore is well known for his cardstock modelling. In his opinion, could somebody merit an AP assessment with a cardstock building?
Well, that's funny you should say that, Bruce. Actually, next month's issue of NMRA Magazine, there's an article that I wrote about a display that I did a cardstock model, or a couple of cardstock models for. It won Best in Show, and it scored out at 110 points. So yes, things have moved on since the days of when I was a master model railroader and had one structure left, and I built a structure out of cardstock. 2 master model railroaders came to my house, looked at it, and said, "We don't know how to evaluate it. It's cardstock." So I left it up to the judges to say whether or not computer-generated siding, if you will, is considered to be a basic shape or not, as it would be with if it were made out of board and batten made out of wood, or board and batten made out of plastic, for example. So they took a look at it, and they decided apparently that it did. And I was satisfied that at least we've gotten that far. And so, yes, you can, I think, make a good cardstock model, particularly if it's scratch built, and it should score merit points.
There you go. So for all those people still stuck in the 1980s, all the AP assessors, the God has spoken. Anybody else want to come in on cardstock modelling, as we have the main man for cardstock in the room, but anyone else? No? Okay, cool. That's cool. We'll move on. This is a bit of a funny one. Again, another question from Richard Dahl. He wants to know what is your... could you share with him your best negotiation techniques to obtain right-of-way space in the basement?
Ooh. I had to buy a swimming pool. So I had to buy a fairly large swimming pool, as a matter of fact.
You could put a layout in that, just put a lid on it. Clark?
Well, when we bought the retirement house, I walked in the door and I went right to the basement. My wife looked upstairs. She says, "This works for me." I said, "It works for me down here." And we came to an agreement. She does everything upstairs, and I have the full basement, except for there's 2 rules. There's no train crap past the second step going upstairs. So that was our rule. It's worked out really well.
Who wants to go? Who's brave enough to go next? Remember your other house may be watching. We'll go to we'll go to Gerry, and then we'll go to Tom. Gerry?
Well, when we moved our retirement home 20 years ago, there was space to build a room for a layout, but the first thing had to be a sauna for the wife. That was something she'd always looked forward to. We had the space to do it, and people with the skills to do it. So yeah, the sauna came first, and then the train room.
Okay. Tom?
Maybe look at it the other way that I'm doing as growing in this hobby is less is more. That if you don't have the real estate, work with what you've got. You know, finish that, work on your scenery and things like that. If you can't build another staging yard or another branch line, so be it. You know, a lot of people, as they go through the hobby, have the big Uber layouts, and then they work their way down to modeling a branch line of the Rio Grande or Central Vermont instead of trying to do the whole Northeast corridor. So use the space what you got wisely, and then, you know, as you go on, you know, talk to the rest of the people in your household as if I would really like this, what would it do damage? So
Clark? Yes, Clark.
I can't hear you, Gordy. Do you want me to go to me?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I enjoy about different scales, and this is where it comes into play. If you don't have a lot of space, there's no reason why you can't do a little switching yard or a switching module layout. And the other big thing is T-track. T-track and N scale is just absolutely fantastic. If you don't have a lot of room, you can work always on a little 2 or 3 modules of T-track. And then when you have the opportunity to go to a show, you can take your modules with you. So there's lots of places to get modeling in. You don't have to have, a 15 by 36 room to enjoy the hobby. And I think people kind of miss that sometimes. And I think, as Tom said, you don't have to have a big layout. You can really enjoy this hobby and get good skills by building a small module.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm glad I've got the panel that I've got tonight, because if there was a MMR from the British region on here, then that question would have stumped them. But I think 2022 come over. If you can count on one hand how many basement layouts you're probably likely to see, so there will still be less stairs. Okay, cool. So where do we go? Where do we go next on the questions? Mark Shipman. Mark asks, how many decks does each of your layouts have? If you have a multi-deck layout, if you don't, just say I'm out. And what do you think are the best heights between the decks for someone who is 6'4"? Mark's 6'4". I don't think any of you are 6'4", so let's just give some tips and tricks to work out what heights to have based on any height. I guess who wants to go first? Tom, we'll go to Tom. Wait, we'll go to Tom because Tom's got a multi-deck layout in the background.
You can look back there. Whatever the height is, he's certain, like last night in our Twin Cities Live, we went to a wonderful layout by Phil Keppers. He's 6'8". So I've operated, his layout, it's way high. I like the lower deck at about your hand height and the upper deck, right about your chin height, so you can enjoy it, and maybe a couple ramps. There is no set. Just make sure that the lower deck's not so low that you're hurting your back, and the upper deck's not so high that you can't reach to obtain anything. So the 40s to 55s is perfectly what I've seen. So,
Clark.
Well, just give me 1 minute. I'm searching for a photo of the layout.
We'll come back to you.
Yeah, please, if you don't
put your hand up when you're ready to go. That's fine. Who wants? Jim? Jerry?
I don't have a multi-deck layout, so right now I have no layout at all.
I feel like I'm playing Master Model Road or poker. That's me. I'm out of this hand. Jerry's in though.
About 54 inches is my base level. I do go up about a foot to another level on the layout because I like a few hills. It makes the engines change sounds by themselves. And the staging yard is underneath, but there's only a foot difference between the two. So I'm not really into that. But I do have one friend from.
Oh.
I think we may have lost Jerry there for a minute.
Who's got a 3-deck left.
Oh, Jerry, I think we lost you a little bit there, but we'll go back to Clark, see if he's got what he wants to show us.
I do. Can I go to share?
You share your screen and then wait a few seconds while we just make that full size for everyone.
Okay. Let me go here. And I'm just going to share.
People are asking some good questions here, Gordy. Yeah, I'm looking at the feed. There's some.
I expected exactly this. Good question.
You guys are sharp out there. That's a good question.
Okay, now I think I'm on share, you guys.
Oh, whoa. Well, yeah, there you go.
How's that?
What we're looking at. Just tell everyone what you're showing them.
Okay, but you can see that, eh?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so the lower track is my staging area, and it's come a long way since this. This is very early in the beginning. So that staging area is about 49 inches from the floor. And then that upper deck, which is now covered with the main yard, that is another 8 inches above that. So we're at about 56, 57 inches. I don't have a double deck. I have basically a hidden staging yard. So, but that's the two elevations. And basically what I did, I needed the space between the trains and the tortoise switch machines, which I was using. Now here is another side of that. If you look at the far end, that's where that comes out of the hidden staging, and we'll come across this trestle bridge. This is the most recent photo. I'm just building the scenery in here. So that's where it sort of comes out. And at that bridge is about 50, I think it's about, because it's climbing there out of from underneath. I think it's about 55 inches somewhere off the floor there. And we'll unshare as soon as I can find it. And there we go. Did that help? I hope it did.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, cool. I am trying to keep up with the questions. Okay, Perry Lamb from Atlanta asks, does anyone have any tips for where he could get some prototype plans for a scale track? Because he wants to build one for his civil AP. As in a weighing track. Weighing,
Yep.
So, not as in scale track.
He wants the actual profiles and everything for the track.
He wants to know specifically the length of the rails that were on a scale track.
Oh,
At least the car length, whatever they're
It's got to be
measuring.
at least a car length, 60 feet, I would guess.
Yeah, at least. Then the leads coming in.
Is that not in maybe the NMRA standards?
I believe it is.
Yeah, you can look that up.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Certainly, if not, Perry, somewhere, but I can't access it right now. I have the drawing that you're looking for, but it's locked in my store in the mainland, so unfortunately, I can't get it just yet. But I do have it somewhere. Walt Wiles from Atlanta asks, what is a quick technique for forming forms for bridge columns to represent poured concrete?
The forms for them?
Clark, yeah, I think, yeah, I could answer this, but Clark will answer it. Clark.
I've used milk cartons. I take the milk carton and cut them up and then tape them together and then fill them up with hydrocal to look like a bridge pier. I've also just taken styrofoam and cut them and engraved them. You can actually do it with almost a pencil to make them look like bridge piers. The other thing is if you take a Lego, you can use Lego as a form and then pour your hydrocal in and pull that out, and then you have your block of hydrocal. And if you do it fairly quickly, once it starts just starting to set up, you can take a ruler and scribe into it and make really nice brickwork and so forth. So that would be my suggestions, and I'm sure the guys have some other ones.
I was going to say the only thing I've seen is to make them out of balsa. I've used balsa to make the forms well, because balsa does a good job of being cuts quickly and seals reasonably well for pouring hydrocal into.
Okay, Tom, were you wanting to answer that one?
I make mine out of styrene. I get the regular shape, And stealing from the military modelers, I use a product, I think it's AK Interactive makes a little tub of simulated concrete or asphalt, and you apply that, thin it down, and I've had really great results making things look like concrete pillars for bridges and tunnel portals and stuff like that. So
cool. Back over to the UK. These questions are great. They're coming from all over the place. Neil Rogers from Englandshire asks, he's building a wooden HO engine house, and he's thinking about making wooden shingles, scratch building his own wooden shingles. Now, wooden shingles is not a common thing in the UK. Just understand where this question is coming from. What thickness of material should he be looking to use in HO, and what would the dimensions of the shingles be, either in HO or 1-to-1 size for him? Who's going first? Put your hand up. Can't all answer at once. Clark, then Jim.
Clark.
Well,
Tell you what, I'll go while Clark listens.
Jim, answer the question while Clark thinks about it.
Well, I was trying to see if I have the model just in this cupboard, so I'm going to disappear while Jim talks.
Jim, answer the question for Clark, please.
I will say that I've had luck, and I know this is probably not going to be too well received, but I've had luck with cardstock using 65-pound cardstock, and actually, Trolls Kirk shows a wonderful way to make those shingles by a nice painting with acrylics kind of thing, and then cutting them into strips to make the shingles. Campbell's material, when it existed, was really great for wooden or shake shingles, but you can simulate it with a brown paper bag and stain it, and it'll make a great shingle as well in HO.
Clark. We're going to Gerry. Gerry?
yeah, I agree. The Campbell shingles were good. I've used a lot of those over the years and still on the layout. The other thing is some other crowd came out with laser cut shingles. I can't remember the name. It was an American crowd, and they were very nice. You'd have a strip, stick it on, and trim it to length, but they were very good. What's available these days, I don't know. Not many model shops around to visit these days.
Oh, here's product placement from Bar Mills product, HO shingles. Bar Mills, held up by Clark. There you go.
The other thing, these are really good. These are by Mark.
Clark, guys. What you've got to understand is that Neil lives in Englandshire, where importing that little $3 piece of card, Her Majesty's Revenue and Custom is going to nail him to the wall for at least $20 for his $3 shingles. So he's looking for the idea of where could he go and find the dimensions for shingles. Okay, Clark.
Dimensions of shingles, I think you can get it through the NMRA information on the standards. I think there is a thing on structures where you can get the size. The other thing I have used before when I'm doing contest models and so forth is cigar wrapper. It's very, very thin. It's probably less than 5 thou, and it works great. It's a brown, and it works just beautiful for shingles.
Cool. All right. We will progress onwards down my list. Steve asks, when you've done a remote evaluation, do you ask the modeler questions about the model? Go ahead, Jim.
The one that we did, we had the modeler set up his model and have a camera. In this case, it was just an iPhone camera that he could move around and show us all aspects and all angles of the model. And we were actually on, I believe, GoToMeeting that we used as the platform. And we all asked questions of the modeler as he showed him. We asked the modeler to move the camera here to show us this particular angle. And it worked quite nicely. is actually probably closer than we could get if we were evaluating it in a contest room.
Great, that's good. Anybody want to? I think Clark's just nipped to the bathroom in the middle of this. This is really good live TV. Never invite a Canadian, eh? All right, okay. Anyone else want to answer on that? Gerry, you've probably done quite a lot of AP assessments. What's your view on speaking to the model?
I haven't done any remotes. It's always been there and looking at it. If we need to, we've asked the person the questions there, but normally we do it while he's in another room and he's making the coffee or whatever, and we go through the model. There's normally at least two of us, sometimes three, when we're assessing a model. But remote assessment we haven't done, so I can't comment too much on that.
So Gerry, why is it that you don't want the modeler there when you're assessing the model? Isn't the AP about helping the modeler improve? What's the reason for wanting the modeler to not be in the room?
No, we go through and you can discuss about it, write down notes, just do. Once we finish the assessment, we come back in and say, yeah, this has passed. If you do it this way, you would have got more points. You write a little bit each time on each section of the assessment, and that goes back to the modeler. Sometimes the modeler has brought a model in and said, oh, I want to put this in a contest. What else can I do? And there were things like adding guttering around the edge of the roof, which was easy for him to do. It was in all scale, and he did that. And it was very easy. We do give tips, and but actually doing the assessment, we do that so we can talk without upsetting the person. Sometimes someone put in a pair of plastic cups out of a coffee machine on a flat car with a couple of wheels underneath and said, oh, it's a tank car. It didn't quite get enough points for that.
So I've got to keep you talking, Gerry, because our production assistant in Australia has gone for a pee. When Gerry is finished. Okay. All right. So
I hope we didn't
he's still away for a pee. So everyone's just seen Gerry. And we've lost Gerry.
Well, I can say that at least in the Sunshine region where I was the AP director, if a modeler asked for an evaluation not as part of a contest, we had the modeler there all the time, and if we made comments that were negative or positive, he or she heard them straight off, and that allowed us to interact with the modeler continuously to say to them, you need to do a little bit more of this, a little bit less of this. This is great. This is really a clever technique, that kind of thing. Another master model railroader, Bob Ham, who was in charge of national contests for years, said that the objective here is to get the person to want to go back and improve the model rather than just taking the model and throwing it in the trash. And so we always try to put it in the best light to encourage somebody to make small changes to improve the quality of the model to get it to a merit award.
Yeah, the encouragement after the judging is always important. And you always talk to the guy and say, well, if you'd done it this way, or if you've gone around the edges a little bit better, you would have scored a few more points. But, you always have to be positive. You don't go in and say, oh, this is a whole heap of male cow droppings, things like this. It's, there are people who have had that attitude, and they're no longer in the organization, thank God. But you've always got to be positive when you're judging.
Okay, cool. Clark, go on.
I know in our region, as far as positive judging, we would put a little note with the model if the member didn't score, a merit, and he would come in and see that note, and the judges would sit down with him after the contest or after the judging and help him and say, hey, if you would have painted this, just as Gerry said, it's a very positive thing. It happened to me. I remember my first model, I thought, I was going to walk away with first place, and I got 47 points. So don't be discouraged. My best suggestion is, if you're going to get into the AP program, go and be a judge, because then you learn to what the judges are looking for. On the last question, Gordy, I went and got the structure, and I know we don't have a camera on it, and I measured the shingles in HO. They vary from 6 inches to 12 inches wide, and they are generally a foot in length. So if the previous question, if that helps them, and that's an HO, so roughly anywhere from 6 inches, 9 inches on this particular model is about the average. I guess when I cut them up, it just went into, I cut them up in that because I want it to not be totally even like any shingle. It's kind of more of a shake style shingle, and they're not totally even.
Appreciate that dedication to the cause here. So we'll move on. Our production assistant should be back, so people should be going big and small again. When you need a P, you need a P. Steve asked another question about Tom's trees, but Tom's answered that question in the comments. So we're not gonna, if you want to, know about Tom's trees, look in the comments. Just for the expedience of time and the fact that questions are still coming in. Robert asks, should a layout have a setup area or fiddle yard or staging? If so, in comparison to the layout, how big should it be? And what's your preferred or favorite type or method of providing off-scene storage, staging, setup, whatever you want to call it? Who wants to go first? Tom. Go to Tom, because yours is an interesting answer to this.
Yeah, I've gone away from that 80s style of staging, and so have most of the layouts that I work on. The great Tony Custer came up with the formula. If you're going to have staging, it's 2n plus 1, and n is the number you think you need. So double how much you need and then add 1 more if you're going to run that much a layout. But always remember that Gordy probably answers this, the sector plates and all the things you see on the great little dioramas, you can have a 1-car fiddle yard. So it's whatever you deem necessary. If you want to stack, store double stacks and long passenger trains, you're going to have more fiddle yards. But if you can design a layout that actually doesn't have one, I think you'll be ahead of the game in going forward. So it's kind of a flowing answer to how much space you have, because it's a huge eater of space. And you think of the price of track and the price of switches and the price of wiring and the work to put it in there. You're adding a lot of, it's draining a lot of your resources you have for a hobby. So I'll pass that on.
Up to Clark.
One of the things that I learned a long time ago is the length of the train, and that sort of applies to your fiddle yard situation or any kind of yard. It should be about 1 car short of your longest passing siding. And that kind of dictates the length of your trains.
Okay. Next, who wants to go next? Gerry.
Yeah, I agree with what Clark says. You've got to have a passing siding, and you've got to fit a train in. Just for demonstration, I will run a longer train sometimes. But staging, to me, is important, because you go somewhere and you go into somewhere else. You can't fit those 2 places on the layout. In my Great Northern, one end is St. Paul, the other one is Seattle. So they're the 2 ends of the staging yard. There are a number of people I know who have no staging yard, and all you can see is locomotives on the layout. Not a lot of rolling stock, but it's all locos. There's 2 locos per piece of rolling stock, just because they want them out. And in one particular case, They've all got sound systems, and they're all on all the time. It's like being in a real railroad shed. It is that noisy sometimes.
Okay, has everyone answered what they want to say? Jim,
I
sorry.
was going to say I agree with Tom that I haven't worked on very many layouts anymore that didn't have anything that went from yard to yard, and the yard was on the layout and it was fully scenic and it was what the capacity of your railroad should be for the kind of operations that you're intending to do. In my case, it's narrow gauge and they're very small yards, maybe 6 tracks or so, with the longest one holding, probably 6 or 7 cars. So it depends on what the purpose of the railroad is. That determines what the size of your yards are going to be.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. All right, move on to the next question. I'm actually on page 2 of my questions, which is pretty cool. And the questions are yet still coming in. Sorry, my stream with comments had stopped. James asks, I don't quite understand this particularly. He's talking about a specific color, which we're probably not going to understand unless we know which paint manufacturer it is. But he's asking, he's got a color called E42. It's a sand color. Can he use that to simulate some kind of rust with a sand color?
If you're talking about the cardstock, I use a T42, which is a brown color, and it simulates rust quite nicely. But a sand color to simulate rust, I don't think would work very well.
Okay, cool. Anyone else? No. Richard asks, do we have any tips for him? He's going to build his first wooden laser cut kit. Hands up. Don't all answer at once because I know you all have something to say.
Well, we have actually, if you want to go to Modeling with the Masters, we almost always wind up with a session on building laser cut kits. And you really have to treat it just as if it's a plastic model. If you've built a few plastic models, a laser cut kit isn't all that much different. The material's different and the adhesive might be different, but they're so precisely cut that when they say it fits here, it fits. So,
Clark.
The one of the top tips I can give you is when you start the laser kit, sand around that edge where the laser has cut the wall or the section. And the reason is that laser seals that edge. And when you go to glue it, just regular yellow glue works well. A lot of guys use the Formula 560, I think it's called, which is a white type of glue. They'll use that. But if you don't sand that edge a little bit and take off that burn a little bit, you don't want to distort the size of it, but you do want to take off that little bit of burn. It will, when it's glued, it will hold much better. That burn will seal that edge of that wood, and the glue won't get into the pores as well, and therefore it doesn't seal, or it doesn't glue up as well as what it should. So just take a little sanding stick, sand that off. You don't have to take a lot off. It's just 1 or 2 passes. And when you glue that will really do well. Most laser kits are built so that you can paint them separately, and then each part is applied onto that. And if I could find my laser kit clinic pieces, they're huge pieces, I could show you how that works, and maybe we'll come back to that a little later.
I'm gonna go in next. Tom.
What I always laser kit, the basic tips are: read the instructions twice before you start in, get a new fresh blade to cut the parts away, and I like painting the parts actually before I assemble the kits. Have the walls painted, have the trim painted, have the windows painted, have all that paint, and then go to assemble it like Clark says. And it just, to me, that seems to work better. I've learned that from other master model railroaders, that you want to build your own little kit. So start with a fresh blade, nice straight edge, sand like Clark did, and then do your painting beforehand.
All right. Somebody's already just said that Clark just solved their problem.
All
Although I
right.
know he's just run away to answer this question again in a second. All right. And just because I don't want to miss the opportunity to yet again say Tom and Gerry, we'll go from Tom to Gerry. Gerry, any tips?
Gerry froze.
They've already covered them. Painting each section before you put it together is better because the glue will act as a bit of a sealant at points, and you'll get this seam of something that's not painting properly. So you've got to paint it before you glue it. With plastic kits and that sort of thing, you can put them together, then paint them. But with laser, before you build them.
Okay, we're going to quickly go back to Clark because otherwise we'll be out of sync with Clark's answers and the actual question. Clark?
Okay, I think I've got some pieces here. So here's one of the little laser kits that we actually use among the masters. And I designed this and have a friend cut it out for me. And can you guys see that fairly well?
Yeah, we can. Screen.
Now, this is just a little simple kit, but it's really great for learning. So you've got your ends. And as I said, what you want to do, you can see how that edge is dark. That's from where the lasers burned it compared to, the sides. So you just want to make sure you sand that off a little bit. And now the other trick, and I think Gerry was saying it when I was getting these parts about painting the models. This is wood. Anytime you're going to paint, especially acrylic paints on this, you have to make sure you put supports on the back. And then when you apply your paint, it can start to warp. If that starts to happen, just take a paintbrush with regular water and paint the back, and it should flatten out just by doing that, and then put some weight on it. Now, the other thing is your windows and doors. It usually comes in a sheet like this. Most manufacturers, the base pieces are made out of basswood. These pieces are made out of Baltic birch, and believe it or not, this is like 3-ply, and it's a plywood. And when you take your windows, you want to actually paint them inside here. Don't take them out because they're so delicate. Once they're painted and dried and these won't usually warp because they're plywood. They've got laminates, and once they've dried, you can take them out. And in most laser kits, there's usually 3 pieces to a door, 3 pieces to a window. You got the frame, and then the two window sections, and you're going to glue those together to make the actual window. And I don't know if I glued this one. I think I glued it in. I was going to show you how that window actually comes together. Okay. So if you have any questions, I think I gave my email out. You can send me an email, and I'd be happy to answer more questions.
Cool. Thanks, Clark. Okay, moving on. We've got just a few questions to go. We've only got about 15 minutes left, so we might have to at some point kill the questions. Yeah, and if the trolls want to go away, that would be great as well. Jokes about tying up your wives are not tolerated by the NMRA. It's tough. Okay. So Dan asks, is 2 2x4 modules enough space to fit a HO switching layout, or should he go back to N scale?
Sorry, I missed the size, Gordy.
2 foot by 4 foot times 2, so it'd be 8x2. Tom?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a wonderful size to start a small switching layout, especially, like I said, if it's one of your earlier ones, either to make, the common term is a chainsaw layout, so you can work on all your skills. You work on your working your way through the AP things. You can do photography, do photos. You can learn ballasting, wiring, DCC, and enjoy the small aspect of, having a small switcher and a few cars, and if you're in England and shunting them around, or the US switching them, I think, and if they're modular, you could take them to shows and show off. I think that's a wonderful way to start, and have that is manageable, rather than trying to build like the 30 by 45 foot layout. I'd be all for a 2x4 switching layout. And one of the things I always see when they come up with these, let's have a track plan contest, they always give you a size such as 2x4. I think one time they should have a track plan contest that you're allowed five switches. What's the best layout you can build with 5 or 4 switches? And then you'll come up with that. So I agree. HO scale, you'll have everything available, and it'd be a great way to start.
Well, I agree. I think you could probably even produce it if it were 2 foot by 8 foot lengths. I think you probably could do it even in ON30. If you have a lot of flats instead of full-size structures and things like that, you could make a nice switching layout in 2 foot by 8 foot.
Yeah. Before we go somewhere else, I have a O-scale 2-rail switching layout in 8 foot by 2 foot.
Yeah.
So, and a HO switching layout that I take to shows that's 6 feet long with a staging track that just hangs off the end. We'll go to Gerry, and then Clark.
Well, I started off in the mid 70s, not long after I got to Australia, at an N-scale club, and they all had modules. Once a month, get together, put them all together, and it's always been a recommendation. It's don't start a layout as your first project. Build a module. A 2x4 is a good size. 2 of them. The second one will always be better than the first, and you'll learn each module you build will always get better. And it's a very good way to start. And you can take it to other places and join them up with other layouts.
Clark?
I totally agree. I think, and I wish a lot of more modelers, especially beginners, would do something like that, because you learn about size and space of your scale, and maybe what your interests are. You're interested in building and so forth. I have a picture up that is 16, or I could put it up if Gordy, if you'll allow.
We've not got time now.
Pardon? No time? Okay, it's roughly 16 by 7.5 feet. And if whoever the questioner is, if he wants to email me, I'll send him the picture.
Yeah. The one thing I will say before we move off on this is go and check out Google Small Layout Scrapbook. That's a great website for micro layouts and small layouts and track plans from all over the world. It's still maintained as a blog, so crack on with that. Carl Arnott, I think, was the guy who started.
Arnott, yeah.
Yeah, and he's not around anymore, but his legacy lives on. So, okay, still some questions there. Yeah, good day to you too, Ron. Ron Marsh there from Ron's Trains and Things, saying hello. Okay, Andy Ambrose asks, do the MMRs think that the potential of internet operation of model railroads coupled to the new virtual meetings is a way to bring in new people to the hobby?
Well, I don't know about recruiting people to the hobby, but it sounds like a fun thing to do, to be able to operate on somebody else's layout by distance. That would be a lot of fun, I think.
You should answer this one, Gordy.
I'm not an MMR. I can't answer these questions. Although I have sneaked a few answers in to help there. But who wants to go? Anyone wants to go on that?
The idea is sound, especially for
Gerry. Go.
Gerry? I think we might have lost Gerry. I can't hear him. No.
Storm in Australia.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
I got everyone disconnected on my screen then. Yeah, the good thing with the problem of distance, and especially as we get a little bit older, we're not inclined to travel as much for operating sessions. doing something over the internet, and the internet is definitely getting better these days. Wouldn't have done it 5 years ago. But, it's not a bad idea. I've got a friend who used to live here in Newcastle, which is an hour north of where I live. He gave up and went back to his hometown, Kansas City, and still communicate. One day he'll come on and operate my layout from Kansas. So, yeah, it's a possibility.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll keep moving on. All I'll say is that in Gordy's weird and wonderful way of thinking about the future, Gordy, this week's thought from Gordy was, how long will it be before virtual rail fan becomes virtual model rail fan? And we have webcams set up on layouts that we go to when they're having an op session, and we just have a fixed camera and stuff like that. So we're going to test that actually as part of NMRAX. We're going to ask a layout owner to set up a fixed camera near a structure, and then record an op session, and then just do some narration over the top. We're going to see how that comes out. But watch this space. It's always going. It never stops. It never stops. All right. So then we come on to James asks. He's got a logging pike on the railroad, and he's putting in some switchbacks, but he's compressed in terms of how deep he can make the seam. And as a result, the slopes are quite steep. Do we have any thoughts on tricks for the scenery so it doesn't literally look like a sheer cliff?
Well, the DNRGW had switchbacks that looked like sheer cliffs, and the zigzag in Australia certainly looks like that, or looked like that before it was, or it's now being rebuilt. But I don't have any problem with that with a switchback, because that's the reason that they were put there in the first place, is they do look like sheer cliffs. They go straight up. I don't think that creates a scenery problem at all, unless I would think that the intervals that you would need just to go back and forth would create the sheer effect, and that's the way they were designed.
I think too also that he said a logging railroad where 90 to 95% of every logging railroad is temporary. They'll probably have a main rail out from the base camp, and then where they build to the new branches or up the side of the mountain to get the lumber is temporary anyway. So those steep grades were built for those Shays and Climaxes and Heisler and smaller trains. The steeper the grade, then you get to run more trains. If you got to run 10 cars and 2 at a time, you get 5 trains. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, especially in a logging line. You know, the 4% plus is normal, like Jim says.
Yeah, so I just want to go back onto the last topic a second, about remote operations, because I forgot to call something out at the end of that before I went on to the next question, which I'd actually made a note about. If you're a member of the OPSIG, if you want to join the OPSIG, now is a great time, because the OPSIG have embraced this digital world and have also gone online and have a weekly online meetings. Their topic next week is remote operations and how to remotely operate layouts, remotely dispatch layouts and stuff. And I am talking to people from OPSIG and who are OPSIG members and other people that I know to actually do some clinics on that topic for NMRAX in the near future. So watch this space and go join OPSIG and you'll learn about remote operations. Okay, we'll move on because I've got 5 questions to get through and 5 minutes to do it. So what paint do people recommend for painting the sides of wheels?
79-cent craft paint.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I use is acrylic craft paint.
Color?
Use one of these guys, those little things, and run it around.
It depends on the railroad and what scenery and what area you're modeling. Because I model sort of high desert, I tend to use a color that's sort of a brownish tan color, but you could have a really dark gray like charcoal or something like that, depending upon the region you're modeling.
Okay. Question about, is it Copic or Coptic? It must be Copic pens.
Copic. COPIC.
Okay, and everyone's autocorrect is putting that to Coptic. So I'm completely confused. What is the best size and color? I think this is a follow-up question.
For Copic pens,
Mm-hmm.
you go to an art store and there are probably a choice of 50 plus colors. I use a medium gray and sort of a medium brown for most of my work.
Okay. David Wolf asks, what is the best way to keep light from shining through a seam in a model structure? Clark?
I just use black construction paper. I cut it roughly the size of the interior of the building. I cut 2 pieces. I make a slot so that you form an X in the structure. And now a lot of times, depending on the building and how I'm going to light it, I will also paint the inside black.
Right.
Okay, cool. And everyone's just discovered now that Clark is a fan of the X-Men. So. Thanks for that, Clark. Good morning.
Actually, that's interference in hockey.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely good at that. Okay. Anyone else want to give any tips for blacking out buildings? Good. Okay. Gerry, go on.
Yeah, sometimes just line the inside of the roof with aluminium foil, the cooking foil. Just glue a bit of that so no light shines up through the roof. That was an early problem with the lights. With LEDs now, it's not such a bad thing. But when you had the globes, they used to glow a bit through the roof.
Okay. John Bonner asks, when scratch building, how do you cut out accurate square window and door openings?
That's one that comes with experience more than anything else. That's all I can say. I was pretty miserable at it when I first started, but a good sharp blade and a good square. A good square and a sharp blade is going to be your best bet.
I know what
I agree. Micromark makes a nice square, and let the knife do the work is what I think. If you put it on there and you start pressing hard to get through the wood or styrene or whatever, it's not going to happen. So styrene, lots of times you can just etch it and then snap it, and you'll get a nice clean line. On wood, like Jim's right on. You can't have a new enough blade and a square, and take your time. Enjoy the process of it, of scratch building.
We'll go to Gerry and then we'll go to Clark's tool shop.
I make sure I use 2 different types of knife for cutting up wood, windows, doors, and such things. I use a normal X-Acto craft knife for major work. But when I have to do something like window fittings and finer work, then I use the blades, a proper scalpel, just like you get in a craft shop. If you buy them in a craft shop, they're expensive. If you get them online, they're very cheap. They don't last as long as the X-Acto blades, but they are much thinner and finer for doing some of that sort of work.
Clark?
All right. One of my favorite tools, it's called a nibbler.
Yeah.
These things for styrene is fantastic. For wood, it can crush it. If it's a brand new one and the cutter is nice and sharp, which is up here, it works great. So what you do, you make a hole either in your styrene or in your wood. So this is the laser piece. You just stick that up through that, and you actually just do that, and you can see the notch it's made where I cut it. It is fantastic for styrene. Let's say here I want to nibble sort of a couple pieces in here, make a doorway, so you can see where I've cut it through here, and it just works great. It is they're fairly expensive little tool actually, but I have always 2 of these because they do get dull, and they work fantastic. And the other thing I use to make sure I measure The opening is a pair of calipers, and this is a digital one. Here in Canada, you can buy them at a hardware store when they're on sale for about $10, so they're not very expensive, but they are all metal.
Harbor Freight.
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember though when I went to sea for the first time, we didn't have digital vernier calipers. We used slide rules and all sorts of stuff. And I'm not that old, so one tip I got, and I can't remember, this came from an MMR, so I'm going to be able to say it. It either came from Elaine Cap, MMR, the president of the European region, or it came from Clark Kooning. I'm not sure which one of you it came from. But if you get a pin vise and a very fine drill, and if certainly for styrene, the drill puts a very small hole in each of the corners of what you're trying to square off, and then your knife will find the holes and go with a straight edge between them. That helps you get a nice square cut because you're going from hole to hole, and you can just nestle the tip of the blade into the hole that you've just cut. You get
we also do that in cardstock as well.
But James Lincoln said in the chat that remember that window frames cover over a multitude of sins. So, as long as you're not doing it, as long as you've not got an interior, you'll be okay. Okay, so final question for tonight, and then guys, don't all disappear because we'll be going back to the video of the layout tours from the Kansas City Convention of the LD SIG tour, which is a layout design special interest group. So if you want to know about layout design, go sign up for LD SIG. You find out more information on the NMRA website. So this final question is from Ralph Renzetti in Canada. And I'm going to go round in a particular order. So hang fire and I'll tell you who's answering this question first. He wants to know what your opinion is as Master Model Railroaders on last weekend's NMRAX event and what your opinion is of this project in general. We'll go to Clark first because you're closest to Ralph.
I used to be really close, but now I'm a 6-hour drive. And I know Ralph really well. I thought it was a fantastic weekend last weekend, taking part in it. I've talked to Gordy previously about this, and I thought it was just excellent. And I think tonight's been excellent too. And I touched on it with Jim. It might be a little hard, but I'd love to somehow do modding with the Masters one seminar like this somehow, Jim, but I don't know how we do it.
We'll talk.
Yeah. And, but I think it's been fantastic. And to all those who have watched, thank you very much. And Gordy and his group and Martin in Australia, they need a big round of applause. They have done a fantastic job in rounding us up. And thank you again, Gordy.
Okay, we'll go to Gerry.
Yeah, all the feedback I've got has been very positive. I thought it was a great idea. Considering it was the first time for most of us to do something like that, it went well. The odd technical problem, which we can't control, but considering, everyone was new to it, it went very, very well. Look forward to the next one.
So we'll go to Tom.
I think the potential of these is unlimited. And I think as long as we keep learning the technology, it's there. And I would like to see the NMRA and the other groups develop some best practices to come up with. If you want to do a layout tour, here's how to show your layout in the best light. If you want to do a clinic, here's how to do a clinic where everyone can see what you're doing. And if you want to do the question and answer in a group setting, here's the software that works best with group discussions and things like that. I would like to see that added to the NMRA as we learn and go forward. The potential for this is fabulous, So I would just like to see people have the ability to do it, because in the Twin Cities region, we have a lot of people signing up for layout tours, but they don't know how to get to this step. So I think this is the way to go forward.
And Jim, who's our national board member as well as an MMR, we'll go to you last.
Oh, thank you. Actually, I jumped in and out of it several times. I enjoyed what I saw. Unfortunately, I'm also learning how to be a farmer real quick, but I enjoyed it, and it was an interesting experience. I will say that some board members have had some concerns, and I don't think I need to air the dirty laundry here about the concerns, because those are things that are easy to work out. I do agree some sets of standard practices would be great, so that there gets to be a little bit more conformity in the way that some of the things are presented. But overall, I think it was very successful, and I think that there are lots of different opportunities in the future.
Gerry?
The one thing about last weekend and what started it was the fact that around the world we were all in a self-isolation. So people had to show their layouts on the layout tours, and they can't talk and describe everything and run the camera and run trains. When this isolation thing is over, it will be a lot better if you got one or even two other people running the layout while you're talking about it. Otherwise, things just tend to wander on and you don't see much of the layout or remember much about it.
No. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. Tonight's been great. This was a good trial of Ask the MMR for NMRAX, and I appreciate you joining us. The thing I'll say is that the NMRAX is not limited to this format, and it's not limited to virtual conventions. What Tom just alluded to there around helping people to produce their own online content is happening. I'm working with, or will be soon, working with Eric. I've reached out to Eric Smith from the OPSIG to help them stream some of their content on Facebook, and I would help anyone else. And next week we have a week off from NMRAX stuff, and that weekend off is not a weekend off for Gordy. It's a weekend for Gordy to consolidate and prepare to launch something called Project NMRAX, which will be to support local clubs, regions and divisions with exactly this content. So it will be Gordy sitting typing the content up for the weekend with the help of a few others on how you can do digital meetings safely, how you can maintain and sustain that beyond the current period of stay in place and lockdown, depending what your country's calling it, quarantine or whatever, and how we can digitize the model railroading hobby and reach out to other people around the world, because the hobby's big, and I think you're only just realizing now how big it is. But the world and potential for this, as Tom said, is absolutely endless, and you have not seen anything yet. I promise you all that. So keep following, keep watching. It's all appreciated. Our next NMRAX event will be on the 16th of May. It will be from 6 a.m. Eastern Time to 6 p.m. Eastern Time to allow for other people around the world to take part. So I apologise to people on the West Coast, that's really early. But for the Aussies, it's really late at night, and then it goes all through their night. So, the Aussies get the thick end of the stick really on this one. But the 16th of May, and then on the 30th, we will probably be announcing some other little events like this that are a little bit shorter than 12 to 24 hours. So keep tuned for that. If people want to get involved with NMRAX events, giving a clinic, giving a layout tour, join the team. If you're into video production, or you're into IT training or any kind of technical support, and you want to get involved, then reach out to the NMRA on Facebook, drop us a message, and I will pick it up, or one of the team will, and we will get straight back to you. But thank you very much for joining us tonight. We had over 130 people at one point, and it's been great. The comments are great. I've got to ask so that you reach out to me and don't tell me on the comments to reach out to you, because my phone is near enough going on general strike right now with 200 and 300 notifications every morning when I wake up. So please reach out to us rather than us having to reach out and find you. But anyway, we will leave you now. My production assistant has told me that the out video that we will leave on the stream for a little while for you to enjoy is some fantastic layouts from Down Under, and the Down Under filter is on, so they should appear the right way up on your screens. So enjoy. Thank you guys, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye, everybody.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Right, guys, we haven't bored you enough. You want more? Jump over onto our YouTube channel, like and subscribe, hit the bell icon, keep up to date with all our uploads. Jump onto our social media platforms and keep up to date with all the events that are coming up. Stick around, we've got more coming. Thanks for watching.